This is M-Wire, Movie Week in Review. M-Wire is brought to you by Audible.com. Sign up today to get a free audiobook download at www.audibletrial.com/geekcastradio. Start today with a free 30-day trial with over 100,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. Don't forget to follow Audible on Twitter at audible_com. And now the latest and greatest in movies with M-Wire.
Hello and welcome to M-Wire's Summer of 2014 Movie Rewind. That's right, be kind, rewind, all that good stuff, even though there are no such things as video cassettes anymore. I am one of your hosts, TFG on Mike. Joining me is Optimus Solo. Hello.
You just dated yourself, sir.
I don't care. People know I'm old. And Movie Remote Dan. Hello.
How's it going?
It's going. Alright, so this was kind of Dan's idea to bring the movie rewind recap kind of thing back. So take it away, sir.
Well, we did something similar to this last year, but this is going to be a little bit different. We're not really going to go over like the box office and critics aspect of it like we did this time last year, mostly because Kevin's Weekend at the Movies already does a lot of the box office stuff, so it'd be kind of redundant.
Yeah.
So we're just mostly focusing on the movies themselves, what we saw, what we thought of the summer, kind of breaking it down and saying, well, how well did the summer perform overall? What did we enjoy? What didn't we enjoy? What stands out? What for negative reasons? What stands out for positive reasons? So it's kind of like a grab bag of what you should see this summer and what you should avoid.
As everything hits DVDs or Redbox or Netflix, this is your guide to what to purchase, what to click on, what to avoid.
Exactly, and stuff is coming out already. Like a lot of the summer movie stuff is already out on Blu-ray and digital and whatnot. So
right.
Yep.
So if you're trying to make a tough choice, just tune in here and we'll tell you what to buy or what to not to watch.
That's one thing. I know we have a whole plan here for this thing, but that's one thing I will say about the releases, the summer releases, and releases in general. I mean, sometimes iTunes gets early releases like a month and a half or 3 weeks before the official DVD and whatever else comes out. Like, not technically a live-action film, but Batman Assault on Arkham was released on iTunes early, like 2-3 weeks before the DVD came out, which is interesting because I think it's taking a hold of that digital market and say, hey, you can get it here before anywhere else.
Yeah, I mean, like Edge of the Tomorrow did that as well, and I mean, Days of Future Past, Captain America, it's kind of becoming the norm. And as a person who collects Blu-rays, I kind of don't like that, honestly, because I think it kills the Blu-ray market because people aren't going to, it's a less of incentive to buy something, a physical copy of something, if it comes out on digitally 2 weeks before you can buy a physical copy of it, even though like the price is about the same. So it's just, if anything, I think it would make more sense to do the opposite way, but maybe that's my own bias.
Mm-hmm.
I'm with you.
I mean, for me, I'm to the point where I don't collect DVDs anymore or Blu-rays. Blu-rays are just too expensive for me. And I'd rather have an instant access to it without having to do multiple steps. Go get the DVD, put it in my computer, blah, 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 when I can just click on iTunes and bam, there it is.
Yeah, but it's the beauty of the beast, I guess.
Yep, pretty much. All right, so what are we starting with, Dan?
Well, I guess before we get into what we saw, we should maybe get into what our anticipation levels were of the summer coming up. I know, like, before the summer hit, it seemed like all the talk was already squarely on 2015, and everyone talking about 2015, even though we're a year away from that. So,
or 2016, or 2017, or... That's all it is now. No one in Hollywood or in the media in general cares about the current year. They want to talk about Star Wars. They want to talk about the next Transformers film. They want to talk about, what's going to be Captain America 3 going to be like when the second one by May it had come out because it came out in April. But I mean, it's just one of those things where we live in a society now where everybody doesn't give a shit about the current year and they want to talk about the next, next year we're going to be talking about 2016, 2017, and hell, 2018.
I don't necessarily think it's that they don't care. I think what it's more of a we live in a society that is very much obsessed with getting information, finding out stuff about things they're interested in, to where you're wanting to find stuff out early. You're wanting to know about who's cast here. You're wanting to know about which franchise is going to have a movie, etc. I'm not talking about us specifically, but as a society in general. So it's not that it gets to the year and they don't care anymore. It's that it gets to that year and now they've already discovered everything about that movie. So now they calm down and then they just wait for the movie to be released. It's more of a we've spent the last 2 years dissecting the casting, dissecting the director, whatever it might be. Now it's the year of, we don't have to go crazy. We can just sit back now and wait for it to hit theaters, and then we'll, I still think there is a buzz about movies after they come out. There still is a billion people writing reviews and blogging and talking about movies that just came out. They're not ignoring the current year. It's just there's not that hype in the months leading up to it because the years before that, they've already learned everything about that film.
Yeah, it's all about that exclusive information. And with that said, Kev, I know you guys talked about this a lot on Weekend at the Movies, but coming into the summer, were there a lot of movies you were looking forward to? Was it kind of a mixed year for you?
It was a mixed bag this year. I would say that before we get to that exactly, it's almost like a shift in release dates too. I think that we're dealing with not just this year, but it seems like it's highlighted this year where we have a lot of front loading where stuff's coming out in the spring, or stuff's coming out earlier than we would expect it. Like, the traditional Independence Day type films, the June, July into August, where we just got used to. That's when all the blockbusters, that's, the summer blockbuster, the summer popcorn flick, that's where all that came from. Whereas this year, it seemed like there was a whole bunch of stuff between March and May.
Yeah, even in April with Captain America, I think technically the Amazing Spider-Man 2, it came out in America in May, but it was released overseas in April, which is another thing. So it's like like you said, the summer is becoming larger and larger, and in a way, it felt like one of the least exciting months this past year was July, and that used to be heavy loaded, and this year was like August and May was really the months where everything was in.
Yeah, so I mean, I know we're talking about summer films, but it's almost impossible for me to ignore the March, April, May releases and just lump it. It's like March to June was the summer films.
Exactly.
I guess twofold, and why I said I'm kind of on the fence on how my anticipation was is, number one, there was a ton of stuff coming out. There is a ton of franchises that were having movies this year. Everybody can be excited about 2015, 2016, etc. But if you're thinking about the fact that, the Transformers franchise is getting a film, the Turtles franchise is getting a film, we're having, 3 comic book films. I'm forgetting now how many we even had. Let's see, Spider-Man, X-Men, Captain America, Guardians of the Galaxy.
Guardians.
All right, so we had 4 comic book films coming out. We had, the Godzilla, which is another franchise. We have Disney doing its thing with like Maleficent and stuff like that. So, I mean, there was a Planet of the Apes franchise having a film. So there's a lot of different big-name geek franchises that were doing stuff. So from that standpoint, I was thinking there's a lot of things here, so there's bound to be some stuff I like. Mm-hmm. On the other side of the fence, though, I knew that some of these films were Transformers and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and stuff like that, and easily could be terrible films. Hold on.
Now, this is one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on here, because I heard the Weekend at the Movies Turtles discussion, and you hated that movie.
Right.
That movie is easily better than Transformers 4 for me.
I don't know. Like I said in the episode, I would have to rewatch them both, and I refuse to do that. but no, even, and don't judge what I'm about to say too quickly. Even something like Guardians of the Galaxy going into the year, nobody knew could have had the potential to be terrible. Mm-hmm. Obviously, it isn't. But I'm just saying, like, even something like that you didn't know about. So you're going into a year where there's all kinds of stuff coming out where it seems like, man, there's just a lot happening. But then you take a step back and you say, but it could be a humongous pile of crap. So that's what my anticipation level. Was I anticipating a bunch of these movies? Yes. Was I assuming that I was going to see a bunch of good movies? I knew I needed to bite my tongue before I would say that.
It's always good to temper your excitement.
I mean, there was some things that could have majorly let me down that didn't, so I'm happy about that. But, as far as judging my anticipation, yes, I was anticipated for the summer, but I was also smart enough to know that there might be a bunch of eggs out there, bad ones.
Mike, what about you?
I mean, my anticipation for the summer wasn't that big because I'm one of those. I'm not like you guys. I'm not like Kevin, where I go see every single movie every single summer. Because I know he has a tendency to do that, and I know Dan, you go see a lot of movies as well. And I reserve my movie theater watching for the big franchises, all the franchises Kevin just mentioned, with the exception of Guardians. I still haven't seen that. It's not that I don't like the movie. It's not that. It's just I would rather wait until pay a buck on Redbox than go waste money at a theater.
You need to go see Guardians so it can get to like 320 million now.
No. But for me, honestly, like you were saying, Dan, the summer really starts in April at this point because April we had Cap 2, and I was really stoked for that. I thought that was an amazing, amazing movie. And it took everything from Avengers, it built upon it, and I can't wait to see where they go with it from here. With Amazing Spider-Man 2, I'll say that I was excited for it. I was interested to see how they were going to envelope all of the, basically the Spider-Man 3 curse into it, and it wasn't as bad as for me, it wasn't as bad as what everybody said it was going to be. It was like, oh, they're throwing in way too many villains again, blah, blah, blah. And then, X-Men was great. Turtles was... I like Transformers I almost said Dark of the Moon. Age of Extinction. I liked it because there was no Shia LaBeouf. I liked it because it was an all-new human cast. But the writing and the comedy style in Turtles was far better. Like, Transformers was technically the dark franchise movie this year out of the ones that I had seen. I mean, hell, Optimus Prime kills a guy, which he should never do. And then X-Men was amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm similar to Kevin, where I looked at it like there are some. When I was at the beginning of the year plotting out like my anticipated films of the year, I mean, like I looked at the summer. I'm like, I know everyone's talking about 2015, but 2014 has a great deal of potential, and potential can go different ways. Potential could leave you disappointed. Potential could leave you even more excited. There were a lot of question marks, like we mentioned. Guardians was still was a question mark because you didn't know what it was going to be like. James Gunn never really ever directed anything that size before. Something even like X-Men Days of Future Past, Bryan Singer coming back to a franchise he left. X-Men wasn't at the best place in the world when after X-Men 3, and it was kind of getting its footing again, but still, it's like that was a project and a half trying to bring that all together. You had something like Godzilla again, like I thought the trailers looked amazing. I thought like I had a lot of potential, but again, another director who was only done a small indie film with monsters, and now he has a huge gigantic project where he's, literally having a budget like, 100 million times bigger than anything he's handled before. And then Turtles was a question mark. So there's all these things that was like, okay, so this could either be really good. There was nothing that I looked at and like, okay, I'm really like the only movie I felt like, okay, I'm pretty solid, and then what we're going to get was like 22 Jump Street because the directors of it have proven themselves over and over again and same actors. So I figured, we'd probably get a solid sequel comedy there, but everything else was like it could be amazing or we could end up disappointed. I knew there was a lot I was going to see. I know there was a lot I was going to go and hope it was going to be good, but I mean, some of that stuff ended up being better than I anticipated. Some hit my expectations, and then some, left me as disappointed as I expected. So, unlike, like we'll get into that later, but there are a few movies here that I just, there were like, I think a lot of great movies, but a lot of really awful movies this summer. It was like a bipolar summer, if anything.
I agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, it was very up and down. I mean, anything that wasn't a franchise film that I had seen a trailer for, I was like, Yeah, I can wait on that. I don't need to see that in theaters. Like all the comedies this year, I didn't really care at all for any of them, um, and just it just seems like this summer has gone by so fast, and there hasn't been a lot of hype behind it.
See, I don't know about that because I would disagree because I think there were. I felt there in like May and especially in August there were every week there was a huge film and that's everyone was talking about either positively or negatively. Spider-Man
Mm-hmm.
came out, then Godzilla came out, and then X-Men came out, and not all the reaction to those movies was negative or positive, but there was a lot of reaction either way. Like I felt like Godzilla was a very much one of those movies where you had some people who loved it. I mean, I was more in the middle, and you had those people who hated it, and then similar with like Spider-Man 2. So I don't know. I felt like there was a lot of reaction to a lot of the films. I mean, something like Transformers, I think it left people exactly where they expected. I don't think it really made anyone a new Transformers fan that wasn't a Transformers fan
No.
previously. And but yeah, I don't know. I felt like there was a good amount, and then you have something like Guardians, which completely dominated the month of August, and it's still one of the biggest movies out there right now. So. Um,
I don't know. I just feel like right now at this point, the biggest summer we've had in the last 7 years was 2008 because you had Iron Man and The Dark Knight.
But then you didn't really
And
have much else. Like I would say, yeah, you maybe you didn't have anything this summer that was Dark Knight level. Well, though you could argue Guardians was near that, but I
mm,
would say that you had like you maybe didn't have like two all stars, but you had a really solid team there because you had X-Men, you had there were
yeah,
those movies, even smaller films like Lucy. Lucy made like over $100 million, and which is it's an okay movie. It's nothing fantastic, but it was another movie that showed it surpassed expectations. So I don't know. I felt the summer was. We'll get that
It's pretty
near
good
the
too.
end, but I thought there was something there. There was a lot of really unique movies, at least.
mm,
But I guess that kind of we're getting into. You talked about comedy. I guess that's a good transition into.
mm-hmm.
Sorry, a good transition into how well the different genres were represented this summer. I mean, I think when you mentioned comedy, Mike, I do agree. This summer didn't have a lot. There wasn't really one great comedy this summer. I mean, I liked 22 Jump Street. I liked. Sex Tape was pretty awful. That was like another one that had potential.
I remember somebody on Facebook shared somebody else's photo or something where it said Transformers sex tape or something or other. That's the only thing I remember about that movie.
Yeah, it's that movie was like aggressively mediocre. I didn't see Ways to Die in the West, but I know that was at least a financially disappointment. But though I thought Neighbors was enjoyable. So I don't know how well do we think comedy would. Kevin, were there any comedies you felt were actually pretty good this summer that you saw?
I've seen more comedies this year than I normally do, I would say. Just because I've actually with a lot of the comedies I've watched them like on demand or Redbox or whatever. It's not usually something I go see in the theater, and I've had more opportunities to do that. So I've seen more comedies, but I gotta say I've really not been impressed. I don't know. There's just not. I need a film that's gonna genuinely make me laugh, and I feel like this whole last decade has been void of those for a lot of things. I mean, there's been the other guys and whatnot that's been funny, but I don't know. I saw Ride Along because there was I was making lots of money, and I thought, well, maybe I'm just missing out on something. Maybe that's funny. That wasn't funny. I
Yeah.
saw The Other
Ice
Woman.
Cube hasn't been funny since Friday.
Yeah. I saw The Other Woman. I saw Walk of Shame. I saw Sex Tape. I saw Tammy. I just never really laughed much on any of them. I mean, they had their little funny moments and their funny scenes, but overall, like, I want a film that's going to just make me laugh from beginning to end. It's going to do something like the first Hangover did, or like Wedding Crashers, or The Other Guys, or Step Brothers, something like that, and we're just not getting it. Um,
Have you seen 21 or 22 Jump Street?
I saw 21 Jump Street. I somewhat enjoyed 21 Jump Street. I have not seen 22. I have heard it's the exact same movie. Um,
I don't know if I
so
agree with. I mean, it's a sequel, so there are elements of it, but
I would like
I
to see
enjoyed the
it.
I enjoyed the first one more. I think the second one gets into a little bit too much of like it's a sequel and it's a little bit too meta with that joke. But
Right.
yeah, I don't know if I agree with that. There's not been any great comedies in the past 10 years. I think
Well, that
sometimes
was an exaggeration.
I think comedy is usually pretty steady, and I think we tend to when we're like away from a decade or away from a few years, we remember all the good ones, and then we like a movie like Ride Along is going to go away. No one's ever going to talk about it again after
Right.
this
I
year.
guess it's more for me like, and like I said, I haven't seen 22 Jump Street. I haven't seen Neighbors. So there's been a few that I've missed. But it's more like instead of like the traditional comedy being the funny ones, it seems like more, at least with the last maybe 2-3 years, it's more of the, um, I don't know if it's not really fringe films or it's more of the unsuspecting films that are the funnier ones. Um, the genuinely funny ones and not so much the traditional, this is a comedy, here you go, and it's like genuinely funny,
Yeah, I mean, I
if
think
that
the
makes any
funniest film.
sense.
Yeah, I think the funniest film last year for me was probably Nebraska.
Right.
So, yeah, I
Stuff like
agree.
that. And like today, honestly, I mean, Grand Budapest Hotel might have been the funniest film I've
Yeah,
seen this year.
it's a good point.
It's not necessarily a traditional comedy type film. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know if you call all of Wes Anderson's films comedies. They're not really.
They're like their own. I mean, yeah, I would. I don't know. It depends on which one. I think there's
But that's
always
what I'm
a
saying. I
comedic
find
theme.
those films funnier these days than the straight up traditional, this is a comedy, here you go.
Yeah, yeah. We do have a lot of those, like, very cookie cutter type of, same kind type of concept. Let's throw Kevin Hart in there because he's popular, or Melissa McCarthy. I'm surprised they haven't had their own movie together yet. I'm just waiting for that to happen. But
That'll be the Heat 2.
maybe. Um,
I'll say one movie that really did surprise me that was really under my radar. Like, had no idea it was coming out because the last one that I had seen him in was he was Jonathan Kent was Kevin Costner in 3 Days to Kill. It's not it's not going to win awards, but it was one of those movies where I hadn't expected it, and I didn't even. That 3 Days to Kill is one of those movies where I didn't even know it was out until I got an email from Redbox saying, "Hey, you can rent this now." And it was one of those things where I rented it, I saw it, I watched it, I'm like, okay, Kevin Costner is the next Batman. Seriously, because in that movie, he has so much gravel in his voice, he could be a double for Christian Bale.
yeah, I have not seen any of the Kevin Costner movies this year that are draft day or like he had like a new movie every week in the beginning of the year. But
I mean, he's been doing a lot of stuff lately, and 3 Days to Kill, outside of Man of Steel, was the first one I had seen in a long time by him. I mean, we live in an age now where everybody's like, oh, let's do a sequel to a 20 or 30-year-old movie. Let's do this. I'm really surprised he hasn't agreed to do Dances with Wolves 2 or Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves 2 or something like that. But I don't know, 3 Days to Kill, it was an alright movie. It was interesting. It was kind of cool. It's not, like I said, it's not going to win any awards or make anybody's top lists. I liked it for what it was because it was something different that I hadn't seen him in before. So, but that was one of the movies that surprised me because, like I said, I had never seen a trailer for it or anybody talking about it before I got that email from Redbox.
I mean, if we're gonna go to surprises, I think there were a decent amount of surprises this year. Kevin, were there any movies for you that kind of snuck up on you and like, wow, that I was not expecting much from that, and it actually ended up being pretty good?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. Obviously, the most obvious surprise would be, without saying how Guardians of the Galaxy turned out. That was a film, like we said, none of us quite knew what to think about it. We were anticipating it, but even when we did our box office predictions, we didn't know what to make of Guardians of the Galaxy. People
I
didn't
was
know
way off
about
on
it.
that.
Yeah, we were both off on that one. So I mean, obviously that's a surprise. Is it like a huge surprise? No, because we all thought it had the potential to be good. We just didn't know what to think of it. There was a few though that I didn't even think had a chance of being good that genuinely surprised me. And the two that come to mind first for me would be number one, Edge of Tomorrow.
Yeah, that's actually on my list as well.
I had almost written Tom Cruise off completely as far as putting out science fiction films. And I know I haven't seen a couple of them, which might be good, but this one I genuinely enjoyed throughout the entire thing. I thought it was a creative concept, a unique way of telling the story. It was a gimmick that didn't become gimmicky in a way that it didn't annoy me or distract from the actual story that was being told. So I was thoroughly surprised by that. I actually saw it in the theater by myself, just on a whim one day, and was very pleased that I went to see it. And then the second one would be the not the Legend of Hercules, just Hercules, starring Dwayne Johnson. I thought that had every chance of being a completely terrible movie, and I'm not saying it's, like Mike said, I'm not saying it's an award-winning movie or even something that a lot of people are going to list as their number one film or in their top 15 films of the year or anything like that. But if you wanted just a good fantasy action film, like, this gave you everything you wanted. I really appreciated what they did with it and the angles they went and the way they decided to tell the story of Hercules. Now, Dan, have you seen it?
I have not seen it, no.
Okay. Well, I'm not trying to ruin anything, but it was a clever way of avoiding the whole, this guy can do these impossible feats and all kinds of crazy stuff. Like, it's not just about Hercules, it's about Hercules and his little group of people, and there's even like basically a bard involved. It's like they have their own little singing companion that's going to narrate stuff and tell us about the story. I don't know. There was a lot of stuff to like about what they did with Hercules. If you're just a fan of fantasy or action type, just epic films like that, you should check it out because it was way better than it should have been. So yeah, Hercules definitely. And Edge of Tomorrow were my biggest positive surprises outside of, obviously, Guardians of the Galaxy. And I was pleasantly surprised as well with Grand Budapest Hotel and Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. I thought both might disappoint me, and they both were better than I thought they would be.
Yeah, and I had Edge of Tomorrow as well. I have not seen Hercules. I do hope to catch it. I meant to, I'll go check it out, and then it was already out of theaters. So,
well, when you see it, let me know, because I'm very interested in your take.
Yeah, it did look like. I must say, like, the trailers never really grabbed my attention, but I think seeing directed by Brett Ratner was really what kind of threw me. But maybe it was good.
I was not thrilled by the trailers either. My biggest suggestion would be to go see Legend of Hercules, and then see Hercules.
I don't know if I want to do that
for myself. Even better.
Or there's another Hercules movie done by like one of the guys from WWE or something like that. It looks awful. It's a year for Hercules. But I had Edge of Tomorrow on my surprise list as well. I just actually saw that a couple of days ago. I caught it on digital download, and yeah, I had that on like my top 30 most anticipated movies just because it looked like an interesting concept, but it was a lot better than I anticipated. It was used well directed, and I think it was a shame that it didn't do well in the box office because it was actually quite a good movie.
I agree.
Another movie that I'd say is not a great movie by any means or anything fantastic, but I thought it was going to be awful, and it ended up being okay, and that was $1 Million Arm with John Hamm. That movie that it's him going to India. It's a completely a Disney movie. It like in every way, shape, and form. It's very corny in that sense, but like in the line of something like The Rookie or Miracle, that heartwarming underdog story. It was enjoyable enough, and also not necessarily a movie, but an actor that surprised me was Robert Pattinson, Pattinson from Twilight. The guy people kill for being an awful actor, and he was actually really good in this movie called The Rover, which came out this summer. It's one of the smaller indie films that just actually came on available digitally download, which is it's kind of this dystopian future starring Guy Pearce, and it's him and Pattinson in the desert, and they're trying to track down his car. It's a really simple story, but he plays this like yokel from Texas that's somehow in Australia, but he's actually like, oh wow, he actually has some acting chops. So that was one of the bigger positive surprises for me. And obviously with positive surprises, that then comes negative surprises or disappointments. Mike, did you have anything this summer that disappointed you at all?
Well, I will say that before we get to that the other one that I know Kevin and I are going to fight over this because we don't agree on this. Like, we don't agree on a lot of things. But I got to say, Turtles really did surprise me. I think there was 2 moments where
When it
In
ended?
the theater, no. There is no. Yeah. Don't BTV's Mr. Neal and use that line. Thank you. Um, I think there was 2 moments in that movie that I actually, kind of cursed to myself or said boo to myself in the theater, and it's like the moment when I could actually hear Johnny Knoxville's actual voice,
Er,
like his real voice, not the put upon Leo voice he's using. Um, and the Splinter in the very beginning. I hated Tony Shalhoub's Splinter in the very beginning, but as the movie went on, I got used to it and I liked it. Um, so that was the other surprise. As far as disappointments, like I said, I don't go to the theater unless I know it's something I'm going to enjoy, so I completely avoid all disappointments.
Yet you
Usually, where I get my
saw Turtles.
disappointments, it was good. I liked it. I enjoyed it. Um, Usually, where I get my disappointments is from Redbox or something like that, where it's like, damn, I want my $1.27 back now. Oh, I will. This isn't summer related, but I will say one movie that I did rent from Redbox that I couldn't. I made it half an hour into it. Should have never had Hawkeye in it. Should have had Matt Damon returning, and it should have never taken place at the same time as Ultimatum was Legacy. Oh my god, that movie is so horrible.
yeah, I mean, if we were doing a retrospective from
I
summer 2 years
know,
ago,
I
that'd be
know.
awesome. But uh, Kevin, what about you? Were there any disappointments for you this year?
Well, let's just start with Turtles.
Were
God.
you really
That
disappointed with you, or did that just meet like your worst expectations?
no, like I thought it might be bad. I thought there would be some things that I was like, oh, I don't like that, or maybe I wouldn't be able to get past like the visuals of the turtles, or maybe I would have a problem with like a character. It was literally bad in every facet. Um, I thought it could be bad. I didn't realize it was going to be awful. Um, it's easily one of the worst films of the year so far. Um, and there's a whole podcast episode where I go off on it, so I won't beat a dead
Mm-hmm.
horse. You can find the MWire Weekly or Weekend at the Movies episode where we talk about the turtles, and you can hear all my complaints. So that only disappointed me because it was worse than I thought it even could be.
Let me ask you a question. Was it worse than Turtles 3?
That's a tough one. It
Yes
was
or
it
no?
was
Was it
worse than
worse
Turtles
than.
1 and Turtles 2.
No, you can no. I'm comparing two bad movies to each.
They're
In
both
your
very
opinion,
bad.
okay. So which one is worse then?
Probably Turtles 3.
Okay, so then there were aspects of the new Turtles that you liked, right?
Mm,
At least one
I don't know. I'd
aspect.
have to dig pretty deep there. The other two that probably disappointed me most, and I kind of knew this was coming, so I guess it shouldn't be a huge disappointment, but Transcendence was really bad. It was just really bad. I thought maybe it was getting a bad rap. It's science fiction, seemingly an interesting story, Johnny Depp, etc., and that was just hard to even get through. Like I was watching that with, I believe, 4 people in the room, and at least at one point, 3 of them fell asleep.
Johnny
So
Depp has that effect on people.
so that was disappointing. Let's hope Johnny Depp has a better film later on in the year, in Into the Woods. And the other film that super disappointed me because everybody was going crazy about it. The trailers got everybody going crazy about it. All my friends were can't wait to see this movie. I'm going to see this movie the first day it comes out. And then I went with a whole group to see Godzilla, and it was all kinds of bad. So that super disappointed me. I don't understand the cutting away from every scene that includes Godzilla and actual fighting, and then flipping to see humans.
See, I didn't like I have Godzilla on my disappointed list too, but the whole cutting away thing, I think that's more modern audience's lack of patience because that very much falls in line with the original Godzilla, very much falls in line with Jaws, even
No,
Jurassic Park.
I,
But I
I
mean, I
think
agree the human characters in that were god awful, but I didn't like the like building anticipation through the cutaways. I thought was, I mean, at
I don't
times
think it was a
frustrating.
patience issue as much as it was, look, we finally have the technical ability to show these massive, iconic characters fighting. And people wanted to see Godzilla fight. It wasn't that you weren't patient enough to wait for it, it's that it never happened.
I think the last 20 minutes is pretty much all Godzilla fighting.
Yeah, but I think people wanted more than just 20 minutes. People wanted a majority of their film to be that fighting.
Which I would say is why a lot of modern blockbusters aren't very good, is because they do have too much of that. Like if you look at the original,
well, I mean, if you had a story to fall back on, then that's fine.
Yeah, I mean that's the biggest issue. Like I think the amount of Godzilla was fine. Like if you look at Jurassic Park, the total amount of dinosaurs in that is 20 minutes, if not 15. Then you look at Lost World, which like tripled that. So just because you increase the amount of that stuff doesn't mean it's going to be a better movie. I think it's the fact that Eric Taylor Johnson is like has a charisma void and an awful actor. It made it stand out more when you're going to this dude who's just like, why are we following this guy? I don't care if he dies or not. I think that to me was the bigger issue.
I think it would have been. I think it was more so that people were like, look, we can forgive all of the story and all of the bad acting and human elements if you give us more fighting. I think it was people, so like it just became a thing where people were like, well, just give us more fighting, because screw the story. Like if you're not going to do a good story, then forget it. Let's just see fighting. Let's see monsters, and then I'll still forgive this film, and it can still be something that I like say, hey, that was fun to watch in the theater.
Yeah, I think that's what like Pacific Rim got right. It paced itself a lot better. So unlike Godzilla, which was,
either way, I thought either we'd get a decent movie or we'd get lots of fighting, and instead we got some fighting, not really good movie. So it was just frustrating.
Yeah, I think I thought that movie had the potential of being like one of my, like it was like in my top 10 most anticipated because of trailers. It looked phenomenal, and I still think the overall look and cinematic aspect of it was still really good, but like everything story-wise and character-wise was just a huge disappointment. And I think there was enough there that I still enjoyed it enough, but it's overall just gigantic disappointment. And I think if you like the Gareth Edwards, his first movie Monsters, shares a lot of the same issues where it's like he just doesn't know how to get good performances from actors. He's great visual storyteller, but he cannot produce a good actual story. So, but yeah, I had Turtles on my disappointment list as well. I had little expectations for it. I just thought it was just such a dud. Like, I thought maybe, okay, maybe it'll be kind of stupid and dumb, but there'll be some fun action to it. But there really wasn't any interesting action whatsoever. And honestly, I was a little bit anticipating Transformers Age of Extinction. I'm like, you have a better cast here. I mean, Mark Wahlberg's an upgrade from Shia LaBeouf. You getting rid of a lot of the fat. But it was just, it was such a, easily my worst film of the year so far. It was just so poorly done. None of the action was at all interesting. It was just, nothing really stood out, at least for some of the other movies. I could point to certain action sequences. I'm like, okay, this is well done. And Mark Wahlberg was awful in every way. He had no personality. He was just, on paper he should be a better performance, but in that movie he was just, there's nothing. He just gave nothing. The best character, played by T.J. Miller, was like gone way too soon. So it was just, that movie was just, and it was freaking 18 hours long too, which made it even worse. But
I'll say this for Wahlberg. If you're in a Michael Bay movie, you pretty much do what's on the page. And let's face it, I don't care what the writing credits say. Michael Bay writes these damn movies because he has final say on every friggin' thing, like most directors do. Honestly, the only outside of Optimus killing Kelsey Grammer, the only really horrible thing about Transformers 4 was the Insta transformations. Those were just ugly and dumb.
Honestly, it wasn't. I wasn't even bothered by Optimus Prime killing anybody. Like, doesn't
bother
me at all.
I just thought it was all pretty awful, and the humor.
Yeah, I was more so bothered by the completely lack of Decepticons and Transformers. I don't know. It's just weird Autobots against a bounty hunter and a bunch of humans. I don't know. There was a lot of stuff to worry about, but Optimus Prime killing someone was the least of my worries in that film.
Yep.
Yeah, and then Dinobots show up, and then that's like literally when your final climax is, when your final climax literally involves you picking things up and dropping them, and like that's the extent of what's going on. I'm like, okay, clearly you have no new ideas because that's all you got. This is a weapon that picks things up and drops them because that makes practical sense in what way possible, but whatever. But anyways, so we touched upon comedy regarding that genre, but I mean, obviously the summer has become the time for superheroes and comic book movies and whatnot. And this year we got our full. Do we, I know, Mike, you talked about 2008 is obviously the like looked at as the banner year for comic book movies because of Dark Knight and Iron Man. Do we feel like this year kind of stacks up to that with X-Men Days of Future Past? You have Amazing Spider-Man 2, Guardians of the Galaxy. I haven't seen Sin City 2 yet. I know that's been kind of mixed, but how well were comic books represented this summer?
I think they were represented well, even though I'm not into the whole Guardians of the Galaxy thing. Like I said, I will see it eventually, but I think it was one of those movies that, and everyone has said this, Marvel took a huge gamble trying to put something on the screen as a full-on live-action comic book movie that about a franchise that most people, unless you were reading the comics, didn't know about. Like most of the mainstream audience knew nothing about any of these characters or this franchise, Guardians of the Galaxy, and I think it worked out. Just because I don't care to see it in the theater doesn't mean that. I mean, obviously the money is spoken for itself. I mean, you know, I think we all have gotten, all of us that are from the, born in the 80s, I think even though some of us are disappointed with some of the stuff, this summer has hit on franchises more than superheroes. Sure, you've got the Spider-Man, the X-Men, all that stuff, but I mean, the only 80s franchise, two 80s franchises that are missing movies at this point are Masters of the Universe and My Little Pony.
Yeah, it seems like we're
I'm okay
getting
with
all
that.
of them here and there. I would venture to say, and I'm not using the word superhero here, I would venture to say that 2014 is, without analyzing every other year, I would say that on just a glance, that it's the most diverse comic book movie year that possibly we've ever seen.
Yeah.
There's literally something for every different type of comic book fan. You have your darker, a little bit, not necessarily dark like Dark Knight type thing, but X-Men was pretty dark in a lot of ways. You're seeing a lot of death on screen, regardless of the time travel aspect. You're seeing your comedic side with Guardians of the Galaxy. You got Spider-Man and Captain America, obviously. You have 300, Rise of the Empire. You have Sin City 2.
That came out.
Yeah, you have Sin City 2. I mean, you literally have a plethora of different types of comic book films that if you're a comic book fan and you like comic book movies, you're going to find at least a couple in this mix that you enjoy. And I don't know
Yeah,
how many years have had that big of a lineup of comic book films.
Yeah, it seems like this year going forward, the summer is, going to be the summer of comic book based movies. Um, because at this point it's either comic book based movies or, like I said a second ago, franchise based movies. Um, and you're right. I mean, this is the most diverse summer we've had because usually we have, in the past, we've had, like I said, Iron Man, The Dark Knight Rises, and
But it's
you
not just
know,
that. It's not even like, even if Marvel had, like, let's say that there was a year where we had Iron Man, Captain America, Thor, and Hulk. Even if all four of those movies came out in the same year, it's still not a diverse group of comic book films. I mean, yeah, they all have their different aspects, but
right?
this one really separates itself when you have something like X-Men on one side and Guardians of the Galaxy on the other end of the spectrum, and you can still
Hmm.
throw in Sin City and 300, and yet still have your basic comic book film like a Captain America or Amazing Spider-Man 2. Like it's every part of the spectrum is just about covered. So there's diversity, not just a number of films.
Right.
So I would say it's good for that. It's also was a big, I've seen, like, I think I'm up to like 40
yeah. I mean,
something. Go ahead.
yeah. I would say I definitely agree with you because I mean, I think what we're seeing a lot with comic book movies too is that I think you guys mentioned this at Weekend at the Movies where comic book movies is really just becoming like a template, and then they're becoming something else. Like Captain America was very much a spy movie. Guardians of the Galaxy was a throwback science fiction film. So it's like a comic book movie is really just becoming your starting point, and you're taking that and making a different genre film. So I think that's
Right.
becoming more and more the norm.
I think they realize that they can't you know, there will be. I know a lot of you have talked about it before. We've talked about it before, like the whole superhero fatigue, and I think they realize that that's a possibility if they were continuing to do the same thing. So they're really breaking the mold with a few of these films this year.
Very much, very much. So
And then I was just going to say one other thing because we were talking about genres, and I think it kind of goes hand in hand with that. If you expand it to the fantasy and science fiction genres, literally, I think out of the 40 plus films I've seen this year, at least half of them, at least 50%, are either science fiction, fantasy, or superhero.
there have been a decent amount of really good science fiction films, like Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. I thought was really good. You know, Snowpiercer, which I guess you would kind
Oh,
of
I forgot
rank
about
within
that.
science fiction. Which is technically a summer movie, which I would say is probably one of the better summer films. I think that was maybe should have been on a surprise list, but that
Yeah,
was a lot of fun.
if I would have remembered that it came out this year
Yeah,
and that I saw
uh,
it. I don't have it on my letterbox yet. Dang it.
yeah. You know, like Edge of Tomorrow too, like we mentioned. So yeah, there have been. I think it's been a pretty solid year for science fiction. There's been some bad stuff in there, like you mentioned, Transcendence, which I would recommend if you didn't like Transcendence. There's this movie called The Machine, which I think is on Netflix now. It's a UK film that covers similar ideas, which I think does it a lot better for like you know 1/10 the budget of Transcendence. Uh, but yeah, so I do agree. There's been a lot of good science fiction and fantasy.
Yeah, and I mean, and like I said, maybe it's not all good. I'm not saying it's all good necessarily, but there has been a mixture of everything. You know, fantasy, science fiction, epic type films, even like some stuff that we haven't mentioned that not necessarily great films, but someone might enjoy it that likes that genre. We've had RoboCop, you had I Frankenstein, you had both Hercules films, Pompeii, Noah. Um, not to mention the stuff like you said, Divergent, Edge of Tomorrow, Giver, all science fiction, Earth to Echo, science fiction, Maleficent. So I mean, there was a lot in that genre. It might not all be good. Everybody won't like all of them, but if you're a fan of those genres, you're gonna find something this year that you like.
Yeah, and
Have you guys seen Earth to Echo?
I have,
I
yes.
have not.
Would you say it's the 21st century version of ET?
No, I would not. Um, it's a lot closer to something like what was the film the other year, Super 8.
Ah,
I don't know. I don't necessarily see it as a ET type film. I guess. I mean, I see the connections, but it
maybe
was.
that's the trailer's fault,
Yeah, I mean,
honestly.
it was fine. It was fun. I think kids that are growing up like that, it would be similar to like what we experienced with like a Goonies or an ET. It'll have that same type of effect maybe on a really young audience. It's an enjoyable film. I'm not jumping up and down about it, but I could see kids liking it. It didn't do super well.
Yeah.
Apparently not. No.
No, I have not seen it myself, so I cannot speak to that. I think it's actually been a pretty good year. Then we can move off for genres too for like indie films. There have been a lot of good smaller movies this year, which seems to become more and more the norm as well. Like Boyhood, which was huge, which actually did pretty well in the box office too. Locke with Tom Hardy, which again we mentioned Snowpiercer and The Rover already, and Frank. That again, they're not like gigantic like box office hits, but interesting films that are pretty good and worth seeing for sure. But so now that we kind of cover the genres, I guess the question is before we maybe wrap this thing up, were there any certain standout moments or characters this year, like certain scenes you feel like will become those iconic scenes that will go on? The people will reference from till the dawn of time or whatever. Any or standout characters that you think really kind of took over the summer?
I don't think it's more so a standout character. I think it's more of a standout scene, at least for me, because I remember the old Bill Cosby bit that references it, but Buck in Turtles, I thought that was hilarious. That they would even think to write that in there, because not a lot of people know what the hell Buck is.
I'm not sure I do. What?
It's a game that kids used to play in the olden days. It's
okay. I think I now remember.
It was something that I had only heard from a Bill Cosby comedy show a long time ago. That I remember it from that, and when it showed up in Turtles, I was like, "Hey, it's Buck! That's awesome."
Interesting.
I'll say that seeing the Falcon in Captain America kind of surprised me, and I think that's kind of a standout moment. How they were able to work that into a real world without having to do super major effects. They, real worlded that kind of. I thought that was kind of interesting. What about you, Kev?
Were there any standout characters or standout moments this year for you, like scenes or whatnot?
Kevin, are you back? You said you were back.
I think you stepped away. I'll go to mine. So some of my standout scenes. I mean, Guardians has definitely a ton. I mean, you talk about characters, you can't not talk about Rocket Raccoon and Groot. I mean, those obviously were huge. Pretty much all the characters from Guardians of the Galaxy, Chris Pratt and Star-Lord, they kind of took over the summer, no doubt. But some of the moments in that movie that like really stuck out to me, and most of the best moments in that movie were just conversations. And the big one was like the "I have a plan" moment, which was really humorous with Rocket showing his stuff in that. There's also a really great scene with Rocket regarding him kind of having more of an emotional breakdown, which was surprising and rather effective with that film. Dawn of the Planet of the Apes had a lot of standout moments for me and a lot of standout characters. Like Koba in that movie is to me the villain of the summer, maybe even year so far. Like a character I was introduced in the last film and really came into his own in his last movie. Was a fantastic character and had a really great stand-up moment. I'll just say it's a human work moment, and people who've seen the movie know what I'm referring to. And it also has this really great shot in that film where you have a camera on top of the turret of a tank, and it's like the spinning shot, which was fantastic. It was like a really unexpected moment that really stood out and was really well done, and it shows you just how great of a director like Matthew Vaughn is, because I think he's a guy who's been making a lot of great films, and I think that really was like his coming out party. And then X-Men: Days of Future Past, the moment everyone went to was obviously the Quicksilver breakout scene, which was everyone was worried about Quicksilver coming into the summer because he looked kind of funky and kind of dorky and a little bit over the top, but he ended up really stealing the show in a lot of ways. It was really funny, and that moment kind of encapsulated it all. So,
yeah, you put "Time in a Bottle" as the soundtrack behind Quicksilver, everybody's gonna love it. What about you, Kev? Standout moments, scenes, characters, any kind of thing from the summer?
Yeah, there's a few here and there. I think obviously the one that Dan was talking about with Planet of the Apes was one that was really enjoyable. The use of the different camera angles, especially like you said in that tank rotating scene. I think whether good or bad, there's well, not necessarily good or bad, but I think there's definitely some scenes in Hercules with Rock that were pretty epic and pretty cool to see on the big screen. I'm not going to give anything away, so I'm not going to give what they were. I believe also the exact scene that you talked about in X-Men with Quicksilver. All the scenes with Quicksilver were pretty memorable. There's a scene in 300: Rise of the Empire. Whether you like the film or don't like the film, there's a sex scene in there that's I guess somewhat memorable. If you like it rough, I guess.
Yep.
And then the Amazing sorry. And then the Amazing Spider-Man 2. Would I be spoiling anything if I talked about one of the end scenes?
No, go ahead. It's been what, 4 or 5 months since that movie came out. If people haven't seen it by now,
if you haven't seen it, jump ahead about 30 seconds. But obviously, the scene where his love interest Gwen takes a plunge.
She bounces off the brick.
Just the way that they did that and the way that she smacked that ground was kind of jarring and not something I expected to see. Even if I was expecting to see her die, I wasn't expecting to see her die quite like that. So those are just some real quick ones that jumped out at me. Not saying there's not a bunch of other good scenes out there, but those are some of the main ones.
One just kind of jumped in my head because the movie we haven't mentioned yet, which I really want to, which is How to Train Your Dragon 2. And that, like, any like flying scene in that movie was fantastic, especially with like there were these new characters introduced called the Alphas, which were, I thought, like, amazing. Like, they were a lot of great like battle sequences, and the use of scale and that was fantastic. So that had a lot of great stand-up movements. And I think it's actually been quite a good year for animation so far. And like with a couple movies coming out, I think it could be a really good year for animation if Big Hero 6 and Box Trolls end up being as good as I think they can be. So, but all right. So anything else before we kind of wrap this guy up? Before anything, any moments or movies you wanted to briefly touch upon before we kind of give our overall opinions of the summer?
No, I'm good.
Nah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if we were gonna, if we were going to grade this summer, A to F, give it comparing to other summers, what kind of grade do you think you would give the summer of 2014, Mike?
Kev.
And I can go with this one. Like I said, going into it, there was a whole lot of films, so there was a lot to anticipate, but you also knew that a bunch of them might be bad. I feel like the same even after the summer's over with somewhat of a mixed feeling now. Dan and I talked about our predictions for the box office back at the beginning of the year. And when we were doing that and having that discussion, I had mentioned that kind of a marker that you kind of had to look at towards deciding if something was going to crack the top 10 was breaking the 200 million mark. And I had looked back at a bunch of different years in recent history to see how many films a year break the 200 million mark. And it seemed like in order to be top 10, you kind of had to do that. Well, we've already had 9 films that have broken that this year. And that's not counting stuff that hasn't come out like The Hunger Games, The Hobbit, and Interstellar that could have a chance, or Big Hero 6 if it got enough steam. So, I mean, we have the potential to have 12 to 13 movies this year that break the 200 million mark. So even though overall the box office is down as a year, there are a lot of individual films that have really been successful. To me, it's been a somewhat of an all or nothing year. You have, these 9 or 10 films that have made $200 million that have, had some good reception, etc. And there's not much in the middle. It kind of goes from that to a whole load of crap.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to say that, I'm not discounting films that are good that aren't necessarily going to make a lot of money at the box office. I'm just saying it seems like this year so far it's been hit or miss. It's been you have these films that make a lot of money or these films that are really good, and then you have some films that are really awful. I haven't had a bunch of films in the middle where it's like it was good, not great, not terrible. That's been the minority this year. So I mean, I guess if I'm just judging it on some of the films I was most anticipating, like X-Men, Spider-Man, Planet of the Apes, Guardians of the Galaxy, and some of those expectations, Hercules with Rock, I would say that the summer did pretty good. If I'm going to look at it from the standpoint of Transformers and Turtles and Godzilla and a bunch of that stuff, I'm going to say it was a pretty crappy summer. So I guess I'll fall somewhere in the middle, and we'll give this one a C+.
Mike, Mike, what about yourself?
See, I don't know. I mean, Transformers overall, I enjoyed the movie because it was different actors than the other 3 films. With, stuff like Spider-Man and X-Men, those were good. Spider-Man 2, Amazing Spider-Man 2 was a vast improvement over the first film. And X-Men, it's finally nice to have Brian back in that seat because I really, the best thing about First Class for me was go F off, pretty much, is the Wolverine scene. For me, though, I think overall, to be fair, I'll give it a solid B-. Out of the movies that I've seen, I've been impressed with a lot of them, but are they movies that I'm going to go and see again? I don't know.
Okay, I guess I'll maybe I'll be the least harsh grader here, because actually I thought if I look at what worked this summer, X-Men Days of Future Past, I'm going to throw Captain America in there because that is basically a summer movie. Guardians, I thought those are really great. And I thought there were some movies that were maybe not like trips like fantastic, but really solid. I thought Lucy was good. I thought, like I mentioned, like a movie like, not necessarily a summer blockbuster, but films like Boyhood, and I thought Locke. So I thought overall there was a lot of really, really solid films. And Calvary, again, another movie that came out this year. Necessarily, again, summer blockbuster, but came out released in the summer. And I thought 22 Jump Street was pretty good. Neighbors. So there were a lot of good movies I went to. A lot of awful films, I would say, that maybe bring it down. But comparing it to other summers, I think there is far much more to choose from, more diversity. when it comes to the overall films themselves. So I'd give this movie this summer a B plus, considering all the different kind of genres that it hit and hit successfully. And I mean, like I mentioned, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, which I thought did some remarkable stuff. When you had a movie that was about drama with apes and ended up being a really good movie, I think even better than the Rise of the Planet of the Apes, which is another surprise film. So I'd give this movie a B plus. So, but I guess before we go, real quick, were there any movies that we missed that we are hoping to catch up with before the year
Well,
comes
first
to
of
the
all,
end?
you win for having the best explanation. Um, so, and I totally can get what you're saying there as far as a diverse summer and with a lot to choose from and a lot of good films. So I'm not having an issue with your grade. I don't think you're far off. I was just too disappointed with a few of them. Kind of left a sour taste in my mouth. But as far as you're talking about films that we didn't get a chance to see that we're still looking forward to, or just films that
Yeah,
have yet to come out.
yeah, those movies that came out this summer that we didn't get to check out yet.
Well, I found that one problem with we made these lists, Dan and I, our most anticipated films of 2014, and I just went to review mine and realized that half the films I haven't seen.
You haven't seen?
I have not seen Maniac yet. I haven't seen A Million Ways to Die in the West. I've heard so many good things about The Chef, and I haven't had a chance yet to finally get to see it. So those Jersey Boys I missed as it just flew through the theater, and I missed it without a chance to see that one yet. So I mean, there's been a bunch of stuff that I had listed that I wanted to see Dom Hemingway I didn't see. So I mean, a lot of them that I have yet to see, I have faith that I will catch them before the year's over. Especially now that I've reminded myself that I wanted to see them. Time gets in the way sometimes, I guess. So those ones that I mentioned were probably the main ones. Most everything in the top 10 that's come out I've seen, but it was that 10 to 20 range that I've missed a lot that I just didn't have time to fit it in the schedule yet.
Mike, what about you?
I mean, for me, I haven't.
I'm hoping you can say Guardians, because I think you definitely need to see
No,
Guardians.
no. I mean, yeah, I will see it eventually. I just haven't. I haven't seen RoboCop, and I think that was on my list, and I don't care enough, I guess. It's just one of those things. I just don't care that much for it. And, I honestly think the only one that was on my list that I have yet to see is Gone Girl, and
Well, that's
the
a tonight,
trailer.
so.
I know, no, it's coming, but that's what I'm saying. It's like that's the only one that I had put on my list for anticipated movies that I haven't had a chance to see yet. Because obviously, as you said, it doesn't come out till October 3rd. But it's one of those ones where now that I'm seeing more of the trailers, I'm not sure if I'm going to see it. Like that first trailer really got me in, and now that they're ramping up the marketing on it, it's like I'm not sure if I really want to waste my money on this movie.
I trust Fincher, so
It's not that I don't trust him. It's just I don't know.
It got pretty good reviews out of TIFF. I didn't read them specifically, but I know overall the buzz was pretty positive. So I don't know if it's going to be award worthy or big best movie of the year worthy, but I'm definitely going to see it. But for some of the summer movies that I missed, I didn't see Sin City 2, like I mentioned. The Fault of Our Stars, which I heard good things about, I didn't get a chance to see. Magic in the Moonlight, which is Woody Allen's annual film. The Get On Up, the James Brown biopic, which I heard was pretty good, and The Drop, which came out last week or 2 weeks ago, which I really want to see. It's based upon a book by Dennis Lehane, who's one of my favorite noir artists. But Mike, you mentioned not Boyhood, but Gone Girl for movies that are coming out. Is there anything else we're looking now that summer's over? What are we looking forward to for the rest of the year?
For me, that's it. Honestly,
Jeez.
I'm just not one of the people that go to the theater all that much. Seriously.
Yeah, I get that. Kevin, what about you?
There's still obviously a lot of stuff yet to come this year that I'm anticipating. Obviously, Interstellar is coming out. Into the Woods, Christmas Day. I'm super looking forward to that. What else here? I know that Dumb and Dumber 2, I had, just kind of a passing interest in seeing that to see how good that is. Let's see, there's 2 more that are slipping my mind at the moment. Box Trolls, which comes out this weekend, and Exodus, another December release, Exodus, to see how Ridley Scott and Christian Bale do with that story. So those are probably the ones I'm at most at the top of my brain.
Yeah, I mean, man, Box Trolls looks so good. I just can't wait to see the movie. Some other ones I'm looking forward to: Whiplash with Miles Teller, and also J.K. Simmons, which I heard a lot of good things about. Foxcatcher and Fury with Mike's favorite actor Shia LaBeouf. I think he's only a small part in that. Big Hero 6 looks like a lot of fun.
Judge too.
Yeah, Judge looks good. Birdman, I'm looking forward to that. I don't know if this is actually going to come out this year, but American Sniper by Clint Eastwood, with starring Bradley Cooper, and Cooper's been doing amazing stuff recently. And you mentioned Interstellar, Rosewater, which is Jon Stewart's movie that he directed 2 years ago about the guy who was basically arrested after doing an interview on The Daily Show in Iran, which looks like it could be kind of cool. I mean, not cool, but looks like a very interesting movie. And also the Imitation Game, because that's actually what won TIFF a few weeks ago. Which usually is a good sign of that it's going to get nominated for Best Picture. Not necessarily going to be a great movie, but it has Benedict Cumberbatch in it, so that's always a plus. Oh, and lastly, Nightcrawler, which looks really interesting.
Yeah.
Jake Gyllenhaal being weird, which I'm always for. So, but all right, anything else before?
Still.
Yeah.
Going through, I kind of went through the list, and I'll say I do have 3. You mentioned The Judge. I saw promotional stuff for that on Facebook, and that looks really interesting. Gone Girl, as I already mentioned, and the other one, only because I think it's super weird seeing the Punisher wear or have his hair look like it's a wig. Him and John Cusack in Drive Hard. I don't know why that is such an unfortunate title for that movie. But I'll say this, for me personally, the animation this year, I just don't care. I haven't liked a lot of the animated stuff that's come out this year. I just have zero interest in it.
See, I'd have to say, you had How to Train Your Dragon 2, Lego Movie, you have Box Trolls, Big Hero 6. I feel like there's some other movies I'm forgetting.
I think if Box Trolls and Big Hero 6 deliver, it will be looked at as a good animation year.
I think it's one of those things where one is going to outdo the other, and the other one is going to flop majorly.
Well,
I think Big Hero 6 is going to be the success, and Box Trolls is just going to go away whimpering.
Well, I don't think Box Trolls is necessarily it's ever designed to be a big blockbuster hit. I mean, it's the studios, nothing compared to that does Box Trolls. There's nothing compared to Marvel. So, I mean, if it does say 6-7 million, it's the budget's not huge on that film, so it doesn't have to do tremendously for that to be, Coraline, which they did, and Paranorman, which were decent hits, but they weren't nothing Marvel level. So I do agree that Big Hero 6 is probably going to be a bigger financial success, because when you have Disney behind you, you really can't lose.
Yeah. No. Oh. All right. Does anybody get any final thoughts before I close it out?
I do not.
Nope.
Gavin?
Just interested to see what happens the rest of the year, so that we can start formulating our top 10 lists and whatnot.
Oh Lord. All right, that's going to do it for this episode of M-Wire. Join Dan and I next time when we will be talking about Dr. Bones as Dredd. Unleash the movie geek in you, and we will catch you next time.
You've just listened to Movie Week in Review on GeekCastRadio.com. If you would like to leave feedback on the show, there are many ways to do so. First, you can visit the website, GeekCastRadio.com, where you can comment on the episode and all of our different podcasts. Be sure to rate our show on iTunes and leave us feedback. You can follow us on Twitter at GCRN Become a fan of us on Facebook by searching Geekcast Radio Network. You can email us at feedback@geekcastradio.com. Call the voicemail line 502-526-5821. Please remember to tell us the show you're leaving the message for and your name. So until next time, unleash the geek in you.
In a world There, I said it. Happy?